right. Want to welcome everybody back here to some FAU After Dark. It's been a couple of weeks. We've been trying to get this going, facilitated, but as Mike Mareshko has found out, having kids is a whole different world trying to do things like this. Like myself and Kris Bartels have been, either kids don't want to go to bed or you fall asleep putting kids to bed or it's just a disaster. So we're glad we're back. And so we're going to do a bunch tonight. And it's been a while since we've talked to FAU fans and told some stories and just sort of messed around a little bit. So again, me, Ken Levick, I'm in Tamarack, Florida, and tonight we've got a little tequila and club with some lime juice. And so cheers to all of you. Mr. Bartels, go ahead, buddy.
All right, Kris Bartels checking in from T-Town, Tampa, the 813. Got some Crown Vanilla. So just a nice half cube of ice. Ready to talk to my boys.
Very nice, very nice. Mike Mareshko, the executive producer of this FAU Radio network, pregame, halftime, postgame host, the guy in charge of making sure Ken's got his credential when we get to a stadium on the road. Wear many hats along with these guys. And I got to say, guys, I'm a little boring tonight. I know it's a long weekend, but we were out in the rain a lot today. So I have literally a hot tea right now. But it's like this vanilla macadamia nut concoction my wife found. It's actually pretty good. So.
Okay.
Hey, cheers. Cheers to bougie Big Mike.
Not as much of a tequila guy as Kenny. If it's
I'm not tequila at all. I'm actually allergic to tequila, so I'm good.
I've seen it. I've seen that
firsthand.
See that up close. So this past weekend, and before we dive in, want to make sure that we are recognizing those who have sacrificed for this nation and the armed services. Of course, that's why we have this weekend, and so hope that you are all doing the same while also kicking your feet up. In the case of Mike and I, the weather's been absolutely horrific down here in South Florida, so not much outside time, but definitely want to make sure that that all of you are recognizing this weekend for what it is. So this weekend on FAU Football Rewind, boys, we listen back to the 2017 win at Western Kentucky, which was truly the point FAU became the East Division favorite after that win, and it was such a seminal moment to beat the two-time defending Conference USA champions, outscore Western Kentucky 22-0 in the fourth quarter. So before we kind of dive into some behind-the-scenes stuff, just that game as a whole, Kris, what were some of your biggest recollections from that game? And then we'll go to Mikey. And Mikey was back in West Palm at that time doing studio work for us. But we'll go around the horn here. Kris, what were your football impressions from that game?
Oh, football impressions. It was a very sluggish first half. And seeing what this Lane Kiffin first-year team did prior to Western Kentucky, there was a lot of hype. So then we were kind of thinking like, wow, did they ring the bell, before coming out of the locker room? Then all of a sudden, third quarter hits, Motor hits a big run, and then the defense kicks it into gear. And next thing you know, they're celebrating, fist bumping, and trying to stay warm. Really,
you're right. It was that Cody Miller pick into the 60-yard touchdown run, and everything just clicked after that. It really, that's the most dominant fourth quarter blitz I've ever seen from FAU. That was absolute domination on both sides of the ball. And if you recall, too, it was a Hayden Nagel sack that forced Mike White into that interception and then the Devin Singletary run, and it was basically an avalanche from there. Mikey, with you, in your role at that point, you're literally on a play-to-play basis documenting what's happening and going through everything. What were some of your lasting impressions from a football standpoint from that 2017 game?
Well, I remember, like Kris said, it was a sluggish first half, even when the defense had forced some other turnovers early on, and you had some big spot plays from different guys. The offense just could not get in sync, and they were wasting some opportunities, and really going into halftime, Western Kentucky put some points up on the board. Late in the third quarter, they put some points up on the board, and so we had been in that spot with FAU a bunch of times in the years prior to this game since I had joined the crew. of being, close, but not able to get over the hump in clutch time. And so then to have this type of fourth quarter where everything turns, and I think anyone who was listening to it that day or this past Saturday on Fox Sports 640 when they replayed it, the way you could just hear it, the energy change from you guys. You could hear the FAU sideline because you're on the visiting sideline when you're at the booth there in Bowling Green. And, there's more and more fans of Western Kentucky who were the back-to-back defending Conference USA champs at the time, remember, for them to start filing out and FAU just kind of taking over that stadium as that fourth quarter rolled on was something that I certainly hadn't really seen in my couple of seasons with the team just yet, and I don't think a lot of FAU fans or former players were used to. And so it was a great turning point.
Yeah, it up to that point, it had been a while since FAU had picked up a big road win. Big road wins had not happened since Howard Schnellenberger was the head coach, and so there were a lot of questions. I mean, we felt good after on the road in Norfolk. And, but Jason Driscoll, how often do you see like 4 touchdown runs from the quarterback? That's just not going to happen. So that game, what I forgot was that FAU was in significantly worse shape early in 2019 in Bowling Green than they were in 2017 in Bowling Green. I forgot that FAU did have a first quarter lead. It was 14-0 in the snap of a finger this past season in Bowling Green. I completely forgot about that. And then the defense led to offense, and it really was Bartels. I think you can attest to this. It was in the amount of time that you've been the color analyst, and we're nearing 8 years for you in this role, it was far and away, to me, the most satisfying road win. The most satisfying road result up to that point in Bartel's time was probably the overtime loss in Florida.
It was it was one of those games. I think Mikey said it, where there's not a lot of FAU having FAU in that situation to be able to have a big road game. That's exactly it. But leading up to that game, you mentioned not having a road win. They spanked ODU. North Texas comes to FAU, beat the brakes off them. So now we're on our high horse. Like, bring on the world, bring UCF back here. You know what I mean? Like let's go. And then that first quarter, I mean, after the second quarter there, 21, they scored, I believe it was 21 unanswered points. It was 20-7 at one point. They scored 20 unanswered. Yeah, that's when FAU kind of clicked in the fourth quarter. But it was a much-needed win, kind of a statement for that season. I think it was also one of those games where Lane came off the bus, tough as nails, no long sleeves. Next thing you know, before kickoff, he's out there all bundled up in this cute little sweater with receiver gloves on.
Yeah.
Okay, man.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because that's one of my favorite memories from that 2017 trip. So like you guys know, I would wait for Lane outside the locker room, and then we do our pregame interview for the pregame show. And so Lane walks out, and he's clearly miserable, like just absolutely miserable, like more dour looking than normal. And he goes, "Come on, let's go." So we walk out onto the field, and for anybody who's never been to Western Kentucky, it's fairly open on both ends. One side has a grass burn where the scoreboard is. The other side, they have a bunch of tents, and it faces the main part of campus. And so the wind is blowing through that open end, and Lane walks out, and I'm like, "How do you like the cold?" He goes, "I bleeping hate it. I bleeping hate it." He goes, "I don't even own a coat." And so he's just like trudging out there. He's miserable, mumbling. So I was wondering, because you're right, he went out there short sleeves, like it was all tough. And then by the time kickoff came, he had a pullover, he had gloves on, he was all bundled up. But Bartels, if you remember, like kickoff temperature was 38 degrees, I believe, if I remember the broadcast correctly. And I had like 4 or 5 layers on. Like I had a sweat-proof shirt. I had a long sleeve shirt. I had a sweater on. I had a pullover over the polo. That place, Western Kentucky, and you experienced it this year, Big Mike. It was a little bit warmer than we thought it was going to be for this past year, but it still gets cold. And as soon as the sun goes down, because we always end up playing like 3 o'clock kicks, so as soon as the fourth quarter starts and the sun is behind that gigantic water tower in the background of that stadium, man, it gets frigid in there. Those are some of the coldest broadcasts we've ever had.
And I wasn't in the booth with you guys there that day, but I remember when we were heading to Bowling Green this past season, Ken, Chicago boy, is warning me it's going to be cold there. It's going to be chilly. Better bring a jacket. Better bring layers. And so when we first got there this past season, I'm trying to tough it out Friday night with like just a pullover, but still keep shorts on as we go to dinner. But I knew that wasn't going to last while we're in the stadium that day because it's an open-air press box. There's not, windows, and you have options to have it vented, the crowd making everything. If you want to see the field, you got to open the metal door that looks like a loading dock in order to get the view out onto the field there. So yeah, cold temperature, that's an uncomfortable element for a lot of the guys from South Florida because the natives like Bartels, the other guys who are playing on this team, we're spoiled. They almost look forward to some other games where it's going to be in Florida Atlantic's favor to be warmer than normal. Not to see it cooler than normal. And, California boy Lane Kiffin's not too pleased to be spending a chilly Saturday afternoon in Bowling Green, Kentucky either when he's used to his, even if he has to go north for a road game in the Pac-12 or the AFC West back in the day, or when he's the offensive coordinator at Alabama, he's not going that far north that the temperature's usually dipping into the 40s. Officially, the game time temperature was 44 degrees, Ken. So
Gotcha.
You got to toughen up a little bit, Ken. I know you haven't been in Chicago for a long time. But.
So I know. A side note to how cold it was, B-Man brought hand warmers, the poppable. He's prepped, right? So
there's that store right by where the hotel is, right? Where it's like you ski.
Yeah, some weird store. Yeah. So he's trying to use them, and the hand warmers are not warming up. So he did it after the first quarter. And that game, it was Halloween weekend.
That's right.
So our impression every year, Ken was like, "No, there's nothing around here. We're just gonna hit Double Dogs, right? Little bar.
It's like a sports bar by the hotel.
Yeah. So we hit Double Dogs, right? Next thing you know, it starts sprinkling. It's kind of early. It's a later kick. Let's hit the town a little bit, boys.
Well, don't forget, it was Brian Rhodes' 30th birthday.
That's right. That's right. So we had to try to do something.
Yeah. I didn't realize there was a Bowling Green bar area, but there was, and we.
Oh yeah. Oh, there was, a little bit. We checked it out a little bit. It was good.
Yeah. So, needless to say, we were a little banged up actually Saturday of the 2017 game because it was Brian's 30th birthday, and so we took him out. Luckily kickoff was a little bit later.
Good thing it wasn't a noon kick.
Yeah. I would have been okay, but I'm not sure Brian would have.
No.
And so,
that's the same game that our SID was trying to text us and call us and check to see where Brian was because he didn't fall asleep in his room.
He was in your room. He was in
the room, and his roommate Ralph, our
Ralph Nataro,
was like, "Hey, Katrina, Brian never made it home. What's going on?"
He was being babysat by Bartels. We were a little banged up, and so there were multiple elements into why this was a tricky broadcast, but it was cold. It was really, really cold, and the people of Western Kentucky are great. Their sports information staff are great. Their broadcasters are great. But every damn year they say, "Oh, we'll have a space heater for you in the broadcast booth. We'll have a space heater." Bartels, we're going on 4 straight trips to Bowling Green.
Yeah. There's no space heater.
Never. Not even a semblance of one. They don't even try.
And coming up to year number 8 for this, I've become a little more outspoken, I think. Right? First year, 2 years, I've kind of been like reserved, like, all right, I'm just going to follow the lead. Whatever Ken and Brian say, all right, cool. Now I demand to know where the food is at. And now from now on, I demand to know where that damn space heater is going to be the next time I get there. I'm sending the email out in advance just to make sure it's there.
Let me throw this out there because you mentioned, Mikey, and that's a good observation on your part, that it is an open air broadcast booth. Those are rare. Those don't exist very often anymore. And for people that are wondering what an open air broadcast booth is, it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it is, you have the booth, but it is all open in front of you. You're in the elements. You're exposed to the elements. And I actually love, like, I absolutely love calling games at Western Kentucky because I love being immersed in the atmosphere as opposed to, just sticking a mic out the window to get crowd noise and then everything else is enclosed. Like, those are great. But that's why I love doing broadcasts at the Swamp, because Florida is the exact same thing. Georgia was the exact same thing. Auburn has an open air broadcast booth. Like, I love that because the fans are right there and you're part of it and you're in it. Western Kentucky's always cold. The problem is we're always going there in mid-October or late October. But I think you would agree, Mikey, and you too, Kris, despite the fact that it's always cold there, it always makes for a better broadcast because we're in it, like we're there.
Yeah, it's the different elements, as opposed to going to most other, whether it's press boxes or just stadiums, if you were
the vast majority
not being up in the booth with us. It is a different element. It's an older stadium. It has definitely a unique feel compared to any other I've been to so far yet in Conference USA. Because even Old Dominion, which was the trip you guys had been on right before this one, that's now a whole new stadium as of last year compared to what it was in 2017.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a great job modernizing and upgrading the field and the facility there in Norfolk. Now we'll see what happens with the team going forward.
Yeah, that is the major potential X factor there. So let's, Bartels, if you want, let's talk about the lead up to that game. And so I remember we flew to Nashville initially. And made the trip up to Western Kentucky. That's not abnormal, flying to Nashville and then coming up. And then typically we would then fly out of Bowling Green. So Lane, I remember I'm looking at Twitter, and it's about 50 minutes or so from Nashville to Bowling Green. And I see Lane is tweeting about being back in Tennessee for the first time. And I'm like, for the first of many times in his tenure as FAU head coach, I'm like, oh man, I wonder if he's in the right headspace for this game. And volunteer fans are tweeting back at him, and it's good natured. But I was just like, oh man, Lane is he's something else. Like we were off the plane literally 20 minutes, and Lane fired off his first tweet about being back in Tennessee for the first time. And it's not shocking at all, but that's one of my lasting memories of that trip.
I think that's when I knew like Lane is real. Like seeing some of the stuff that he tweeted before that, I always thought like this guy has to have somebody who has his handle, you know what I mean? Who's kind of like his PR guy.
Yeah, right.
Like we're off the plane, he's on the bus, and typically, coaches are discussing like personnel, who's fit, who's going to be eligible type of stuff. No. Lane Kiffin's letting everybody know in Nashville he's back. But he's actually driving over to Bowling Green.
I love it. One of the things, Mikey, you saw was the relationship that Lane had with Wilson Love, who went with him to Ole Miss to become the strength and conditioning coach. So one of the things that I'm not sure everybody knows, I think around the program it's pretty common knowledge, but it appears that Wilson got an offer from Tennessee to become their strength and conditioning coach after the 2017 season, and Wilson decided to stick at FAU for 2 more years because him and Lane are just tight. Like they have a really strong trust-built relationship. If you recall, Kris, Wilson Love didn't make this trip. The only trip that he missed in his time at FAU. And keep in mind, Wilson was Lane's first hire to the coaching staff when he took over at Florida Atlantic. Wilson had suffered a blood clot while lifting, I believe, and was in the hospital. Wasn't allowed to fly. And so he was back in South Florida because he couldn't fly because of the blood clot. He told Lane, I don't care, I'll drive from South Florida to Kentucky to be there. Lane said, no, rest up, get better, and we'll, just make sure you're good. But Lane, in the pregame team meeting, got emotional and teared up. And this is the only time I ever saw this from Lane. Didn't even know he was capable of something like this. But he said to the team the night before the Western Kentucky game, if you guys have one reason for winning this game, make it Wilson. And he broke down in tears and walked out, and that was the end of the meeting. That was, at that moment, I was like, FAU by a million. That was a striking moment, and it also was the first time that we saw the boxing bell that was brought out to quote unquote answer the bell, and that was a staple of that 2017 season.
Yeah, I think just with him being the first hire, you mentioned having offers. I'm sure Wilson had to have had a ton of other offers besides the bowls, or I even think I heard Wisconsin offered him. After that, remember that season we stayed in Madison for a week, great week. That was amazing, by the way. Just glad I was there, right?
Yeah, we had a better week than people down here. With
100%. I won't let my wife know that.
Yeah.
But to be the first hire and to be the associate head coach of a program as a strength coach, I think it says two things. One, the trust that Lane had and the genuine love and respect that he had for Wilson, and two, knowing your worth, and Wilson saying, look, I'll stay here, but this is kind of what I want. There's a mutual respect there, and I think those two are going to be tied at the hip no matter where they go for the duration of Lane's career. And Wilson is, I think, part of the reason why FAU had as much success. Wilson saw these kids more than the coaches did.
Yeah.
And from a player's perspective, I appreciate what Wilson did because he nurtured these relationships. These kids wanted to play hard. I remember Aziz going out on a limb and saying how much he appreciated everything Wilson did for him. And he's one of those guys that is more important to the players than the actual head coach. And it's rare to say that.
Yeah, completely. Mikey, let's get back to that 2017 game, that FAU win. So FAU outscores Western Kentucky 22-0 in the fourth, ends up winning by 14. And don't forget too, and this is another thing that I forgot until listening back to the game, because you and I, Kris, talked about it in the second quarter of this game, was that this was a short week coming up for FAU because there was a Friday night at home against Marshall. But after this game, Mikey, after the win in the way that FAU won it, where there was no passing game to speak of until Driscoll finds Willie Wright down the seam all by himself for the touchdown that basically iced the game. To me, Mikey, this truly was the game where you're like, FAU can seriously do this. It was win 5 at that point in the season. This was uncharted territory for us. I've never experienced the potential of full eligibility that early in the season. Really not at all. There was one other instance, and that was in the Brian Wright interim year where they got to 6 wins in the finale in the Shula Bowl and didn't get a bowl bid. But that was truly the time where I think that the entire conference, including us, Mikey, were like, hey, FAU can legitimately win the East Division. This is a real thing that's about to happen.
Yeah, it was one thing for them to go beat Old Dominion, a team who's still new to the conference and has not really had that level of success yet in Conference USA. The pounding they put on North Texas at home, good win, but you had a team coming up from Texas to Boca Raton, and you didn't see much out of the Mean Green. I don't remember all that, really early on in the 2017 season. We got them back in the championship game and reminded them of the pounding they took when it came to the conference title game. But, again, Western Kentucky, this was going to be a spot where you're going to Bowling Green, not an easy spot to play for anybody, And you were taking on a team that, correct me if I'm wrong, they had won the league the last 2 years. And FAU, to Ken's credit, was doing it all on the ground early in the game. You know, this was a game, I think, where most of their success to get their good start in Conference USA play had been with the ground game. Remember, Daniel Barr was the starting quarterback for this team a few games into the season. It wasn't Jason Driscoll. And so, you know, Driscoll showed that he could help with his legs also, but we didn't really see that the team could trust him yet with his arm. And to Ken's credit, he called it, saying, you know, and in a game where you got outgained through the air, 371 to 93, but when 49 of it comes on a huge strike to Willie Wright for 6, that cures a lot of ills. And from there, you started to see, as the season progressed, it was definitely still a run-first offense, but they could trust Driscoll a little bit more than they had early on.
Yeah, without question. And to me, it's still maybe the most fun game of the FAU championship era. Just because there were twists and there were turns, it was tight and it was close. I mean, this past season, the game should have been over, and it got unnecessarily tight. One of the fun things about the 2017 game, though, Kris, was the fact that for the entire second half, Rusty Smith, his entire gigantic family were in the broadcast booth with us. That's another thing about the Western Kentucky broadcast booth is it's huge. There's just a lot of room. And Rusty Smith and his wife and all of his kids were hanging out in the booth and cheering, and just a part of it in that 2017 game. Like, looking back, that was just so special because there were so many elements to what into that game.
Yeah. No, Rusty, definitely. I was afraid of every big play, whether it was offense or defense, because he is so damn aggressive.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a handshake, a fist bump, or, you know, a chest bump. This dude is all out.
Yeah.
And at one point, my hands were so cold, I did not want to remove them from the sweater I had underneath the coat that I had on. This is not happening. But, yeah, Rusty was in there. He always makes that trip. Most of the time he's over there with the president and shaking hands and kissing babies and stuff like that.
But just ended up with us for the entire
yeah. I'll tell you what, these last 3 years we've had some celebrities in the box, from Rusty Smith to Monty Kiffin. It's been phenomenal. So I do appreciate that.
Well, and the thing is with us, you know, we're all on the same page, and that's why we're a good team. But I feel like the more people in our booth while we do our job, the better. I like that. I think it's why not? Let's make it a communal affair. I'm good with that. You know, Kris, you played with him. You won a championship with Rusty, and to me, he's still the most important player in the history of FAU football. Sorry to Jared Allen, and I know I make these proclamations, and this is to get me to the point I'm about to make. For me, I love Rusty. I absolutely do. For Rusty towards me, it's a bit of a feast or famine, love-hate relationship. I think he loves my passion for FAU. I think he hates my hyperbole and my declarations about things that I've seen without actually putting enough thought into it. I know that he doesn't love some of the declarations I've made about greatest games in FAU history or greatest teams in FAU history. And we're just going to have to deal with it. That's our relationship.
That's who you are, though, Ken. Mikey and I, we talk about it when you leave. We're like, yo, is he going to be okay this game? Is this the Ken we're getting today? The next thing you know, you switch it over, and you're like, this is going to be the greatest game FAU ever plays.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, but after thinking about it, though, and I said this, I believe I said this in the Boca Raton Bowl, and I stand by this. The 2019 version of FAU is probably the greatest team. We may have even talked about it on the air before that game, maybe even during the Conference USA title game. That's the best FAU team of all time, in my opinion. The way, by the time the first week of October hit, this was such a solid, good team. Great quarterback play, good running game. The defense was lights out. We know that. Like, I just think it was better than the 2017 team. The 2007 team was amazing and really trailblazed. The 2003 team obviously made the really deep run, the semifinal run in 1AA. But it just, this 2019 team, and you've seen all of them, Kris. Like, you more than me have seen all of them. And it just felt like this was the most complete team FAU's ever had.
I think that's 2019. You mentioned having a balanced game. You talked about Driscoll and his passing game coming up to this point. We saw at ODU in 2017 Driscoll have 3 scores and almost 200 yards rushing. And we're like, where did this come from? Like, you drove up for that game. Right? And then we see 94 measly passing yards. This Western can, no offense, I think Driscoll's a great guy. Awesome quarterback, manages the game well, but how do you win a college D1 football game with less than 100 yards passing on 25 attempts?
Right. Well, that was the one question off the Western Kentucky game is how long can FAU sustain? If at some point things need to even out. It turns out that we were 2 weeks away from evening out because once the Shula Bowl hit, then FAU became completely unstoppable because Driscoll really found his way. And it was so it took a little bit, but that was not sustainable at the time, Mikey. That some of the offensive numbers we were seeing from FAU in 2017 in the Western Kentucky game really reinforced that, like, at some point things need to even out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, all the damage, most of the damage Driscoll had done early on in that season, whether it was his great game in Norfolk or what he did in Western Kentucky, most of his big plays he made were with his legs as well. If he wasn't handing off to Motor or Buddy Howell or somebody else, and he kept it himself, most of the big times that Ken was getting excited calling Jason Driscoll's names because he had run for a first down, not usually passed for it. And I think the comparison between the two teams, I think the best way to describe it, Ken, is that 2017 team is probably the best team as far as dominance, just plowing people over. Mm-hmm. The 2019 season we just got through is the most resilient team we've seen because while you could compare position groups, Robinson to Driscoll, compare the secondary, what we just saw with Miko Dotson and Chris Tooley and company compared to Herb Miller and others, compare this units by seasons, 2017 is going to win out probably by the time you get done the whole tail of the tape. But I think that's what made this team last year so special is they had a lot of warts. They were not on paper going to be better always than their opponent, but they'd find ways to win. And certainly that was something that happened, finding a way to win in Bowling Green back in 2017. Again, I think was such a turning point because so many times they were unable to just get that last, even going back before Lane Kiffin, the first few years I was working with you guys, with Charlie Partridge still as the head coach, there'd be those games they were in, and how many did they lose by a field goal or, so many gut-wrenching losses where they were right in the contest, couldn't pull it out. And this time, whether it was, the Rickle fake punts, run for 22 yards for a first down, or the other big plays they got, they found the way to win.
Mikey, I think you'll agree that there is a difference between the most dominant team 2017 and the best team 2019. Like, I think that's a fair assessment of those teams.
As far as teamwork and pulling each other up, absolutely. And I think a lot of people might actually respect what was accomplished in 2019 more than 2017 because they weren't just plowing teams over. I think there's a lot to be said for that and why, part of the reason it was such a fun ride last year. But I think you go back to this game in particular and why it's remembered so well. It's not just because Mulder, really exploded onto the scene there. It was that you started then going forward, I think, instead of being in LaVica mode of, okay, what's going to happen next and the other shoe drops. It was, all right, you know what, we're in this, and they're going to figure out a way, and you just had a different mentality going forward after this game.
Yeah, and go ahead, Kris. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, just piggybacking off Mike, from the player's perspective, when you know that you're in a situation, the third quarter coming out of halftime, and you're down, you have that feel. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, bro. No jokes. But when you know as a defense you're going to stone cold this offense coming out because you've had it, or you know as a defense that your quarterback is going to pull through and that your star running back is going to be something everyone knows he is, your mentality is different throughout the rest of the season. The way you approach practice is different throughout the rest of the season. And I think that's the assault that the 2017 took. When you think about 2019, just the perseverance. You know, you don't have your lead middle linebacker. You don't have your drafted NFL running back in the backfield. You don't have your drafted, second string running back in the backfield. But you have your starting quarterback. You have some guys returning at the receiver position. 2019 was a fantastic team. Not dominant, but they are probably, if not, top three.
I just think 2019 is the most well-rounded team that
there you go. I'll go with that.
Like they didn't give up points. They forced a ton of turnovers, and after week 4, that offense was lights out. Kris Robinson was absolutely sensational. The best individual quarterback season since Rusty Smith. And for me, I will say this, and it was a talking point during the game in 2017 at Western Kentucky. Certainly was early parts of that 2017 season. Jason Driscoll, what is this team with Jason Driscoll as quarterback? I truly, firmly believe this. If Jason Driscoll's on the roster, whether it was starting the season as the backup or eventually becoming the starter or starting the season as the starter, and this is not a disrespect to Kris Robinson, who last year got absolutely jobbed not being named Offensive Player of the Year in Conference USA. It's silly. Jason Driscoll, if he returns for his final year in 2018, FAU, we're probably, in my mind, talking about 3 straight Conference USA.
I think without a doubt. Not just because of his understanding, mental aspect of the game, the way he's able to control the huddle, but just his confidence grew as the season went on. And imagine going into 2018, knowing that you can be the horse, knowing that you led this team to the first conference championship, since being in the medium, excluding 2007. But just the momentum going into spring, you're the guy. But he decided
he did his own thing. He's making a lot of money. He's doing just fine. He's a great kid. That whole family's awesome. Nobody begrudged him of that decision to leave football. But I do think to have him as either an A, safety net, and I get him potentially not wanting to be a safety net, or B, the potential starter. I'm glad things worked out for Kris because we all love Kris, and we have what Kris Robinson has done not only on the field but off the field for himself makes you feel excellent. And I'm glad things have worked out the way they have because he's just an outstanding kid. But if from a football standpoint, if Jason Driscoll is in charge of the offense, at least through stretches of 2018, I think that FAU probably is in the Conference USA championship game. He had such a mastery of the timing, and he got them up to the ball so quick. And man, that 2017 offense under Markey was lightning quick.
Right, that was what made Driscoll special. Is he could say what you want about arm strength or the throws he could make or not. What he could do was help keep that ultra high octane Lane Kiffin, Kendall Briles offense in sync, on pace, and defenses winded and confused. And he could definitely make, you didn't see a lot of things getting out of sync, out of rhythm. Driscoll called the game. He understood that offense, and that was probably his greatest strength. And I think even once you transitioned away from Kendall Briles to Charlie Weiss Jr. and the new system coming in, that we had last year, Robinson was able to understand, and you mentioned his off-the-field progressions too, Ken. I think what we see with Robinson developing on the field is directly because of some of the changes in perspective he's had off the field. And if he tried to do too much early on, I don't think he would have had that problem in 2018 with Driscoll trying to do too much. Right. I think that Robinson certainly had the chip on his shoulder, wanted to prove all the doubters wrong. Now, he's going to have, like you mentioned, between getting slighted at the end of last year, and if you're reading some of the, preseason lists for quarterbacks to watch, so Sporting News did a big one. I mean, he's being left off these lists where he accounted for hundreds of yards more production. and multiple touchdowns, fewer interceptions. I mean, any of the way you would do these metrics coming off last year into looking ahead to 2020, Robinson's getting slighted again. And I just hope that he is remembered what worked for him in 2019 is to not always have to be Superman.
Bartels, where are we at minutes-wise with this? Because I have a bunch I want to get to, but I also don't want to go too long. We may have to do a part 2 here either tomorrow or like Wednesday or Thursday.
I don't have the calculation on that, but I feel like we're coming up on the 40-minute mark right now.
I don't want to go too long with this. So I've got a bunch of stuff that we're gonna do a part 2, but I do want to sort of go through a couple of questions here that people have asked me about, in particular, what is this year going to look like as we try and navigate through a pandemic, but not necessarily football, but like us as the broadcast team. And someone asked me, do you think that you'll actually be at games? And it's a good question. Like, I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I really don't. I don't know what restrictions are going to be put in place, if there's going to be any restrictions still. I'll be planning as if we're traveling. I'll have a mask. I'll make sure that I'm sanitized and all those things. There might need to be separators in the broadcast booth. I don't know how any of these things are going to work, but I have acknowledged, Mikey, that like there's a chance that you're sitting in an isolated booth somewhere watching a screen calling games.
It's possible. I mean, we're seeing how often that's happening with, whether it's ESPN doing Korean baseball or, some of the other events that, let's face it, a lot of the TV broadcasts over the years. Like I remember there was a game that FAU actually hosted a couple of years ago. It was on Fox TV.
It was Miami.
But Fox crew was not there.
Right. It was the FAU Miami game in 2015.
There you go, the 2015 home opener, the sellout. And, like Dave Wannstedt and company are in a Fox studio. They're not in Boca Raton. So It's been done before, but usually that's to save money on TV production costs. It's different than, usually the team broadcasters go with it. That said, we're not in what usually happens in any respect right now.
Yeah, well,
so, you might be like what you saw with the match up at Medalist, where there's dividers in the booth. All this could be determined, based on things that change now. And, we're within 100 days until when we're supposed to be at Minnesota on September 3rd on a Thursday night to kick things off. A lot could change between now and then. We've seen how much has changed just over the last couple of weeks. More will probably change as states continue to reopen, and it might be a state-by-state decision. I think we have a ton of great momentum for the people who were initially worried we wouldn't even have a college football season. Right. I think what you've seen between, Notre Dame changing their entire academic calendar to say, we want to make sure we've got a fall semester going on.
Yeah.
The SEC vote you had
the
just
Big 12
to open things up. It seems like things are trending to make sure that games happen. How that looks and sounds for us, for fans hoping to attend, that is still definitely to be.
Yeah.
I just hope we don't have blow-up dolls the way the Korean Baseball League does, taking fans' places.
Yeah, that backfired a little bit. As someone who, and I haven't done it this year because there's been no sports, but me personally, in the
soccer,
I'm typically calling soccer, and I am calling it off of a monitor. So I have done both sides of this thing. As a broadcaster, and especially on the radio side, it is so much more important to be on site and on location because, as you know, Kris, how often are we looking at the sidelines to check out injuries, and how often are we trying to describe the atmosphere and need to see the stands and need to see the surroundings? Like, Kris, that's incredibly important. And so from a radio standpoint, being on site is of utmost importance. We can do our job. We're all very good at what we do. Like, we're a good team. We'll be fine either way. And so I'm not worried about it. But, it obviously our preference would be to be on site, but I think depending on the state, depending on the travel restrictions, it's very much a legitimate discussion where we're going to be for different games, and those are answers I don't have for the many people that have asked me over the last 2-3 weeks. I just don't have answers to that because there are so many unanswered right now. But it's definitely interesting. We're definitely here. We're ready to go. We'll be ready to go whenever we get the call. But I don't know how that's going to look. Another question that I got during the course of the week, Kris, and I'll let you start off with this, is what is the best stadium in Conference USA?
Ooh, best stadium. I mean, I'll be biased and say FAU has the best stadium. If we're
Outside
talking
of FAU.
about, like, overall, like with the food.
I knew that's where you were going to go. No, just like the fee.
Big factor.
Yeah, that's tough. I like Middle Tennessee. They do some good stuff. I feel like every time FAU plays Middle Tennessee, they have something going on. Like,
I hate
black jerseys. So everyone's there wearing all black, and everyone's in the stands because there's this rivalry with MTSU and FAU, and I like that place. For the West Division, I like we went to where we go, UTEP, I think.
The Sun Bowl.
Yeah, and we were able to walk down to the border, the Mexico border. That was pretty neat, but the stadium was underwhelming, so.
Weren't impressed by the Sun Bowl?
No, with this, Mikey, you weren't there. So here's the thing with the Sun Bowl. It's awesome. You see it on TV.
Sun Bowl's cool.
It's got the mountains, and it's cool. Like UTEP, El Paso. I love El Paso. I absolutely adore El Paso. It's a tough trip to go on because it's a long flight. But, man, I love going there for basketball. I love going there because El Paso's cool and it's different. But the Sun Bowl.
It's hipsterish, Mikey. That's what he's saying. It's hipsterish.
I love it. I love those things. You know me. But the Sun Bowl, the thing is, it's antiquated. It's very antiquated. We had to walk up 30 rows of stairs to get to the press box with our equipment. There's no elevators to get into the press box. It's really, I couldn't believe for such a high-profile stadium how antiquated it was, and that's why I think Bartels says it was pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, plus, I mean, Mikey, I think you would agree with me. You and I are on the same page as far as pregame meals. You cannot have a potluck at a Division I football game.
Oh, come on.
You can't have a smorgasbord.
Are you kidding me?
Maybe we'll bring Popeyes, chicken nuggets, or maybe we'll have Taco Bell platter.
What was it? The one time we went there, Bartels, it was 2016. Or no, 2015. It was 2015.
Yeah.
It was like Pizza Hut, Taco Bell. They had individual tacos out there. Cheetos, Popeyes. Yeah, it was like big.
Like, what are we doing here, guys?
Like, no, listen. I've had my fair share of runs at Taco Bell, whether it's 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. I'm a Taco Bell fan. But if you're in El Paso, Texas, is Taco Bell really the best they can do? Really?
It's a good point.
I'm waiting for something, magnificent. You know what I mean? I'm like, at this point, I'm there for these travel games because of pregame meal. Like,
it's a factor. It's a factor. I haven't been to all the Conference USA sites yet. I'm looking forward to getting to Marshall this year, and that's going to be a special season, I think, up in Huntington all season long because remember, it's the anniversary of the unfortunate plane crash. So, right from the jump, they're scheduling, a week 0 game. They've moved up. There's going to be a lot of things going on there. Middle Tennessee, I've heard both sides of the spectrum because I know Ken's not really a fan of Murfreesboro, and Kris is. I thought UTSA last year was awesome.
UTSA is awesome.
Boca Bowl is unique, an indoor type venue. There's been a lot of big events there. There's a premier bowl game that happens there.
The Alamo Dome is cool.
Well, and we had a very successful game there between the result that we had in San Antonio that weekend, plus a little help from the school to the south against Marshall. That same day, we set up everything for the return trip to the Conference USA Championship game once we took care of Southern Miss. But we also get to go to this year, and Hattiesburg is another place that, if it wasn't for FAU at Southern Miss, I'd probably never get to in my life. But I am looking forward to checking that out. at least the good thing about Bowling Green over the Sun Bowl is at least the Bowling Green, they got an elevator to get you halfway up, like to the second deck. And after that, you've got to schlep everything up to the
I will say the Sun Bowl is a long walk up a lot of stairs, but it's not nearly as dangerous as what you experience at Western Kentucky.
The incline.
Oh, it is almost straight down. It's like free solo.
It doesn't meet code. There's no code regulation. You cannot.
Yeah, it's literally like reenacting free solo, football edition. Like you're literally just like at an 85-degree incline, and it's cracked concrete, and it's I honestly I don't know how Monty Kiffin got to a broadcast booth this past year. That was quite an achievement from all of his handlers. That was incredible. So,
Danny Moore coming through.
Danny Moore coming through as always. And again, shout out to Danny Moore because we love you, and I can't wait to see you guys when we saw you guys. All right, there's definitely part 2 that has to come. Bartels and I need to cinch it up with the kids, put them to bed. We've got a preview later this week, 2019 Shula Bowl, and that really was where FAU was starting to roll, and you knew they were going to start to roll. And so we'll cover that and a whole variety of topics. We have a bunch of questions to cover, but we wanted to get this knocked out, wanted to reconvene with you guys, and good to see you guys. Good to see you gentlemen again. Mikey, you're looking great. Bartels, you're looking as always, and we'll do this again this week, okay?
Sounds good, guys. Appreciate you guys.
See you, boys. Everybody stay safe.
Here we go.